Well, I'm here.
And we're live.
Looks like we're live. Hi there.
Start us off, Greg, while I pin the stream with an introduction to yourself and your books.
Oh, that's just so exciting, pinning the stream. One day I must learn how to pin a stream. It's funny, isn't it? We were just talking about A-level science and the difficulty of maths that the children have to confront. And I don't even know about pinning the stream. Anyway, so just a small recap. 12 months ago, I published my thriller, The Coming Darkness, which has just come out in paperback. Because interestingly, the publisher of The Coming Darkness of my thriller series is publishing in a very traditional way, hardback and paperback a year later. Whereas you and I spoke in July about Murder at Church Lodge, which Hodder obviously were really pleased to be able to follow up in November with Murder at Bunting Manor, which is today's extravaganza. And that that quick turnaround, I think, is something that they were keen on. Then, so not the books, me myself. Again, this is something that you and I have spoken about before. I was very happy writing and producing live theatre, and I thought this was great. And I thought it would probably be my last career because I'm in my early 60s and I've had sort of 5 different careers of about a decade each since university. And then the coronavirus lockdown meant that I couldn't write and produce live theatre anymore because it had become illegal. And so I decided to do something else. And that, of course, was sitting in my chair in the corner of this, my study, and writing novels. Anyway, so there you are. That's me.
It is, and you're such a fascinating person to talk to because you've had those different careers.
I think it's important, if you can, if life lets you and the circumstances allow it, to do different things is really important, don't you? I mean, it's very easy to do tomorrow what you did yesterday, and that isn't always the best thing.
Can you tell us a bit about Murder at Bunting Manor? I am 5 pages from the end, annoyingly.
Oh my God, that's a nightmare. However, 5 pages from the end, you know almost everything.
No,
Okay, so
I think I know what everything is. We won't give spoilers away.
no, we won't. Okay, so the key thing is this: that Murder at Church Lodge. So Murder at Church Lodge. Maisie Cooper has to come back to the UK from her job, which is not a massive job, not a glamorous job, as basically a tour guide in Paris. And she has to come back to the UK because her brother has asked her to come back and needs to talk to her and needs to tell her something. And she discovers that he's dead. Now, because it's a murder mystery, you won't be surprised to hear that she finds out that he was murdered. And this is a particularly deeply felt, bitterly felt thing for Maisie because she and her brother were estranged. And although it's a cozy mystery in which everything in the end turns out right, there's still for Maisie that sadness that on her parents' death, her and Stephen's parents' death, she allowed their relationship in grieving to become fractured. Now, Murder at Bunting Manor picks up the following month. Murder at Church Lodge is in February, and it takes place with a background of 1972 winter in southern England, power cuts, and miners' strikes, and all of those things that were going on when I was 11 years old. Murder at Bunting Manor follows on. And so there is in Murder at Bunting Manor this sense that spring can't be very far away, that spring must be just around the corner. And it's just around the corner for Maisie in her personal life. It means that her relationship with Jack Wingard, the officer in the Chichester police who she meets in Murder at Church Lodge, can develop a bit further and they can become closer. But unfortunately, because it's a murder mystery, she gets embroiled in another investigation. And because she now feels this responsibility to put things right, to try and help other people, and in a sense, I suppose it's an arrogant thought, isn't it? Put them right. she does things that she shouldn't, that drives a wedge between her and Jack. Of course, again, these are mysteries where everything comes right. As I was at Fatal Shore Festival in Shoreham a couple of months ago, talking to Fazim Khan, and there was a question from the audience, and the audience was, "Why do you write cozy crime?" And he, like me, we don't only write cozy crime, but when we do, why do we? And the answer that he gave was, because when you put it down, you feel good. Because everything's right with the world, isn't it? Once that one thing, that one bad thing has been removed from the story, everything's fine again. And that's what you're aiming for. Anyway, so Maisie Cooper, Murder at Bunting Manor. She is drawn into another mystery, and it takes place just within a few miles of where her brother died. But it's unrelated to that first mystery. It's an entirely new puzzle, and one that also has a quite a deep connection to her own family background.
That was a good way of wording that.
Good.
Do you think that cozy mystery as well? Well, a lot of writers don't like being classified as that, but do you think it also lets people explore kind of different, more unusual protagonists?
I think it can. And isn't that, Kaz, because the protagonist is often an accidental investigator? If you write something, and there's lots of procedural crime writers that I like very much, but I'm not really drawn to writing it because I don't. I'm not so interested in the people who are fitted into the framework of the police force or the military police or whatever organization it might be. And even in my thriller series, The Coming Darkness, one of the first things that Alexander Lamarck does at the beginning of that series is he tries to resign. And he can't resign because he works for the government, and the government will give his mum, who is ill, preferential medical care if he stays in post. But he wants to resign. He's not comfortable with working in a context where he's not certain that the orders that he's being given are benign. Now, of course, Maisie doesn't have that thing, but she is an outsider to the world of investigation. So the ideas that she brings to it are all based upon her understanding of people's personalities, her sympathy with victims, her empathy with people who she's only recently met. And I think, yeah, that makes her an interesting character.
It's a thing I really enjoy about cozy crime, to be honest.
Good.
It's a genre I really enjoy, but I quite like that you meet more unusual people in it.
Yeah. But you do want the circumstances to change, don't you? The third book in the sequence that will come out next March is Murder at the Theatre. And that, still 1972, spring has advanced another month in southwest Sussex. And it's actually, in reality, Chichester Festival Theatre, which 4 or 5 years later, I worked backstage there when I was just a kid, 16 years old. And excuse me. And the world of the theatre is a different sort of set of people, quite heightened personalities, all really interesting, all quite, most of them very ambitious. That's quite good too, because they're highly motivated to advance their careers, get ahead, all of that. So there's that as well. There's the fact that all of my books have cast lists. All of these cozies have cast lists. And although there's some repeating characters, there's a whole new set of relationships in each one. And that comes from Maisie being drawn into a new location, a new community, and working out how to understand these different people.
Do you have? Is the series going to move outside of 1972?
Okay, so we are Murder at the Theatre is April, just on the cusp of April, May. The next one will be Midsummer's Day. So that will come out next July, and it's called Murder at Bitling Fair. And Bitling, in my imaginary world, is another village outside of Chichester, not very far from the villages in the other novels. And so that means, so where have we gone? We've got from February through to Midsummer's Day, so 23rd of June, which means that I'll have to write 4 or 5 more in order to get to 1973. At least that was my first thought. And then as I was writing them, so I've actually written another one. 4 is Murder at Bitling Fair. I've written another one, Murder at Notre Dame, which takes place when Maisie goes back to her job in Paris. And I was sort of cudgeling my brains about how I was going to make that happen, because I also want her and Jack to be happy. So how can I then separate them and send Maisie back to Paris? And then I realized that I already had this subplot in Murder at Church Lodge, the first one, which is that Jack Wingard has never been promoted above sergeant, not because he's not very good, but because he lives with his grandma, for whom he is responsible. So he is this, in a sense, outside of his working life, he's also a carer. And that means that he's not been able to take a promotion path in the police and go and work in Horsham or Crawley or Bristol or London or wherever, in order to experience different policing challenges and be on a path to promotion. He's turned that opportunity down. So it struck me that when Maisie does go back to work in Paris, it can be for a period when Jack has gone off, I don't know, to Newcastle or something, and he's there for 6 months, and so they wouldn't be seeing one another anyway. And I think that solves that problem, because I don't know, you tell me what you think, but if you make a will they, won't they romantic story last for too long, it can become annoying, right?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the will they, won't they story, because I think it can go. Depends how it's done, but it can go on too long, can't they?
Well, I thought
Sometimes.
it was really interesting when the Twilight novels first came out, and there was that switch of point of view, wasn't there? And there was it the third one, and Bella was in love with the guy who's a werewolf instead of the one who's a vampire for sort of a period, and that and it sort of, it felt like it made it thinner. It felt diluted. It didn't feel more intense, I don't think. Anyway, so I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want Maisie and Jack's relationship, and obviously they're going to be together, but I wouldn't want their relationship to go on like unfulfilled for too long, because it does in the end dilute the intensity, and maybe they don't want each other after all if they can't solve it, right?
Yeah, I think it has to be believable. So I think like I'm thinking like Ellie Griffiths novels. You know, you get the
Hmm.
will they, won't they all the way through the whole series, but it sort of works because it's believable in the
And there
relationship
are
series.
yeah, and there's so many things in the way of their relationship as well, so many circumstances that change the child already, and who is older and brings her own challenges, all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that if it's just two kind of single unattached people,
Mm.
you can't really make it drag out too long, can you, without it just
It
being
feels
what you
Yeah,
do.
it feels that you're doing it willfully. It's not natural anymore. You're forcing it, I think. Anyway, we'll see. And of course, have you? I'm sure you will have read the novels by Nio Marsh, which are brilliant. No, brilliant puzzle whodunits. She wrote classical puzzle whodunits between about 1932 and 1980. And very long lived. Her first profession was the theatre. She was from New Zealand. Her book Clutch of Constables was the first cozy crime novel I ever read when I was about 14 years old, and I was super impressed by the cleverness of the clue setting, and trying to work out who did it and why and all of that. Um, Anyway, what she did with the relationship between her detective, Roderick Allen, and the painter, Agatha Troy, is she she had the Second World War. She could send Roderick Allen out on a mission, and he could be abroad solving something elsewhere. Then when he came back, Troy could be out of London, at some, evacuated somewhere and running an art school in the sticks, and they wouldn't see each other. And she could naturally, with the circumstances of their lives, keep them apart.
Yeah. Do you think? I mean, you can't give away too many spoilers because we're going to say, do you think Maisie and Jack will get together?
I think they have to, don't they? I mean, it seems to me that that's a promise that you make. If you go and see a rom-com movie, there is the I'm going to be very writerly now, because obviously I work with lots of writers helping them develop their plots. But here's the thing: there's the setup at the beginning of the movie. Then there's the long middle of the movie where everything becomes more complicated and there's full of misunderstandings and misapprehensions and so on, until it gets to the point 3/4 of the way through where if you turned it off right then, you'd think there is no way that they could ever get together. And then the last quarter of the movie, if it's a good one, cleverly undoes all of those mysteries and misunderstandings and confusions, and they can be happy together. It resolves all of those puzzles and problems that the writers created. If you think of it in like if it was an adventure story, and I guess The Coming Darkness is an adventure story, 3/4 of the way through The Coming Darkness, it seems impossible that Alex can stop the terrible stuff from happening. And yet it's not a spoiler if I tell you that he does. Because,
Well,
there's a sequel coming out in April, right? The
I was going
Coming
to say there's
Storm.
more in the
So
series coming out. So
exactly. So clearly he's got to be at least partly successful and survive. So, and there's got to be, still a world to save and all of that stuff. Or think of it, if we stay in the world of film and think of it as a James Bond movie, 3/4 of the way through the James Bond movie, his love interest, surely she's now going to die. His friend in the FBI, he seems already to have died, but by the way, later we'll find that he's not dead, and James Bond will escape from whatever bounds he is caught up in, and he'll win. And that's that's the nature of the storytelling, isn't it? That you get 3/4 of the way through, and it looks that it can't come right, but it does. And I'll just say another thing on that, which often comes up when I'm working with playwrights, and we talk about the fact that if you write a tragedy, it looks on every page that everything's going to go wrong, and at the end, it does go wrong. But isn't it cleverer if 3/4 of the way through it looks like everything has to go wrong, and yet plausibly and satisfyingly and convincingly it comes right? So I think that's cleverer.
you're just leaving us now curious where you're going to go next in your books.
Yeah, that's the plan.
So you're drawing on your theatre experience for the next one in the series.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay, so I had this the small bit of backstory here. Years ago, in gosh, when would it have been? About 10 years ago, when I was teaching the MA that I wrote for the University of Sussex, I was working with a lot of very talented students, and a bunch of them have gone on to be professionally published writers, which is great. But it was very expensive, I thought. To do an MA is, even back then, was like 13, maybe even £14,000, which always seemed to me a lot of money. So I talked to a friend of mine who was the director of literature and the spoken word at the South Bank Centre in London, and offered to teach the same content as the MA, but for whoever wanted to do it with no audition, and people just had to turn up for the evening class, and it would be, I think it was £12 for each 2-hour evening class. So if you did that, because I provided 2 a month, and some of them were taught by other people who I organized. If you did them all over 2 years, you got the same content as the MA for about 750 quid. And the whole point of that, well, no, there was 3 points to it. The first one was it was open access, no auditioning. Second one was you didn't have to do every single one. You could come when you were able to. And if you missed one, it didn't matter because I'd try and recap the next time and, all the rest of it. It reduced the cost enormously. You also didn't have to have a degree in order to do all of these workshops. Whereas on the MA program, you either had to already have a degree or you had to have professional equivalents so that you could justify studying at level 7 on an MA program validated by an important university. So all of those things were taken out of the game. And it meant, of course, that the people in the room were more diverse in age and background and ethnicity and socioeconomic class and all of those things. It was an incredibly satisfying thing to do. Anyway, long story. Each year with those groups in November, I would do National November Writing Month, and I would try and write 50,000 or more words and share it with the people who were interested in the group and say, well, look, this is the haphazard first draft that I've come up with, trying to write 1,666 words a day. And because I did that for, I think, 4 years in the end, maybe 3 years, 3 or 4 years, I've actually got 3 unfinished novels that I've never gone back to of about 60,000 words each, whose lead character in 1982 is 26 years old and who is a character in Murder in Bunting Manor who is 16 years old.
Ooh.
Exactly. So because you're 5 pages from the end, you know who I'm talking about. And when I started writing Murder at Bunting Manor, I had in the back of my mind that it would be great to connect these different strands of the books that I've written, even these sort of these unpublished books. And I've done the same in most of my theatre writing. A play set today will have a character in it whose grandfather is a character in another one of my plays where the action happens in 1940. And I really like that sense that the whole thing is an imaginary world, not just each novel, but the whole thing. So what I'm really getting at is that there's all of these stories are based around the person at the center of them, the protagonist with their particular ways of thinking and empathizing and understanding or the circumstances they find themselves in. And it's almost as if by connecting the different books, I've got this like automatic backstory or automatic later fulfillment of who the characters are. And that, of course, makes them feel more real to me.
There's so many things I want to come back to from what you've just said.
You're welcome. Go ahead.
I know. I'm just picking which ones to go with first.
Mm-hmm.
I do. I love writing, reading books by people where I feel like the author knows so much more about the world and the characters than I do.
Yes.
Like there's just like this whole world that they've imagined and they know about and connections and
Yes.
things that
Yes.
I've still got to find out, but I know that they're there because the author will have done them. You feel like you're in good hands. I like that you've got that kind of plan.
That is exactly the words that I would use. Yeah, that the writer is a safe pair of hands. It's what my wife Kate Mosse gives to the readers of her historical fiction. And all of her readers know that it all makes sense, and it all fits with the backdrop of real history, which is like the panorama behind her work. So I think that's That's really good. Can I add another thing to that? This is I think, a really good example of a writer really knowing their world. So, quite near the beginning of The Lord of the Rings, Frodo asks Gandalf, "Why did Bilbo not kill Gollum?" And there's a bit of a conversation about it, and Gandalf says something like, "Because he may still have a part to play." And then about 900 pages later, Gollum does have a part to play. And it's only because Gollum is still there 900 pages later that the Ring of Power, which is such an enormous weapon that not even good people can be trusted to wield it, it's because of Gollum that the Ring of Power is destroyed. And it wouldn't be without him still being there. And I just love that sense of scale across that epic book, that all of those pages separating those two moments, the promise of what is said, I don't know, page 150 or whenever it is fulfilled on page 900 or page 950. I love that.
Yeah. Coming back to the other points, you're
Go for
right.
it.
Kate's historical books, awesome as well. Read some of those when I was younger, loved them. Need to go back and read more. But are you going to publish the ones with the character? I nearly named the character who was 16. Stop
No,
myself.
yeah, don't do that. Don't
I
do
won't
that.
do that. Are you going to publish the ones with that character in?
Well,
Because
it's
I want to read those now.
oh, that's a good sign. I want to read them again, but I don't dare because I've got a lot on. So I said to you that I don't know if you can see it on the wall behind me, but the poster for The Coming Storm is like there with sort of reflection of the light in it. So that's April. So following on from The Coming Darkness, and I'm if I had a wider frame, I'd show you over there where my computer is, because I'm writing the third one, The Coming Fire, right now, and I will have a complete draft of that by the end of the year. You know, I'll probably be editing for myself over Christmas. Okay, then as soon as I've done that, I need to write a new draft of Murder at Bitling Fair, which is the fourth Maisie Cooper mystery, because that will come out next July. And then, because I had a gap in my timetable back in April, May this year, so I was doing some theatre work, but not very onerous. I was just supporting other people. I wasn't producing anything. I wrote the first novel in a third sequence. I don't think I've told you this. I love this about this character. So, like, it's contemporary series. It's another accidental detective, and he's an elderly theatre director who's never retired, but his telephone no longer rings, and he gets drawn into this mystery that nobody else thinks is of any importance. But he, of course, over 280 pages, solves it. So I finished the first draft of that, and I gave it to Kate, and she gave me some good ideas. So I wrote a new draft, and I gave that to my agent, Luigi Bonomi, who's a wonderful author's agent, and he gave me some notes. And so I did that, and I gave it back to him. And then he gave me some more notes, so I did that as well. So that book exists, but we haven't taken it to any publishers or anything like that, because even if they wanted it, I'm sort of too busy with the other two series, so we couldn't pursue it. Anyway, long answer to the question, can I write the 1982 stories or rewrite them from my drafts? Yes, I can, but I've got to do all those things first.
Fair enough. That's a reasonable answer.
Good.
As your fans, though, we will still be slightly disappointed that the 1982 series isn't coming out tomorrow.
I know, it's always the same, isn't it? When you read a book that you like, you want the next one straight away. Did I tell you last time we spoke that when we were first talking to Hodder, Luigi and I, they were going to publish the Maisie Cooper mysteries 12 months apart, and I said, well, no, that won't do. And they said, well, I suppose we could do 8 months apart. And I said, Luigi, can you tell them that won't do either? And eventually we got to 4 months apart. Because I was actually arguing with them that if we work really, really hard, and I would have put everything else in my life aside in order to do this, we could have published the first one, Murder at Church Lodge, physically, and have all three of the other ones ready digitally. It would have been too much to get them, produced physically.
Yeah.
But all three of the other ones digitally available at the same time. So, we could have released one physical and digital book and the other three, but they didn't want to do that. They wanted to have a sort of cycle of production so that they all had the same production techniques of physical book, cover design, audio book, all of that stuff, which is great too. I'm delighted with the work they're doing.
Then we're going to come back to the classes that you offered, because I think that's amazing.
The classes at Southbank.
Yeah, Sam has also said on it, it's incredible. What a good idea! Because I love that you made it accessible to so many people.
It's really important.
Because you said your MA produced lots of writers. Did you get lots of writers coming out the Southbank course as well?
There are, but I don't know so much because, of course, I didn't sign them up and read their CVs and all the rest of it. And if they were there regularly, I sort of got to know them, but not in the same way as students whose work I'm marking. Because you see, that was a missing element, obviously, of the Southbank program. I didn't take in work and mark it and give it back. It was only the experience in the room. But the techniques of teaching that I use are all based on story development. I don't tell people, look, this is Dickens, isn't he great? I am much more likely to say, there's a woman crying on her own in the pub, and the pub's really busy all around her. What's going to happen next? And by exploring what happens next, little by little, we'll understand what happened previously. See, story development. And it's on Monday next week and Wednesday next week, I'll be at the Criterion Theatre working with playwrights with my son Felix Mosse, who is brilliant in this area of story development and is a fantastic actor and writer as well. But he's interested in the editorial process. He's interested in the polishing and refining of a script. And I'm really interested in that for me and for Kate, but not for anybody else. By the time the story exists, all the sort of serotonin in it for me, I've absorbed it all. And I want other people to take it forward. So that means, I think this is quite an interesting thing as well, that when I'm working super closely with authors, playwrights, novelists, whoever it might be, I don't tend to get involved with the last quarter of the book, because I figure by the time they've got 3/4 of the book, I mean, I'll come up with ideas of how things can resolve, but not in detail, because the last quarter of a book is really defined by the first 3/4. The only things that can happen in the last quarter are things that the first 3/4 have set up. The characters, the situations, the locations, the things that are at stake. Well, that's it. It plays out. And that's really the domain of the individual editorial consciousness of the creative author. But I do know that people from those Southbank Centre classes have gone on and been published, but obviously I'm not as close to them.
Donna's watching as well. She's in Stoke, which is, I used to live there for quite a while, so it's quite nice.
Yeah.
Knowing someone's in my old stomping grounds.
Lovely. I have a Stoke story, just briefly. I was mentioning our son Felix Mosse, who he was in a tour of it was a rock and roll show based on a Shakespeare play, and I can't for the life of me remember which Shakespeare play now. But the idea was it was a sort of jukebox musical that they put together with Elvis Presley songs, to tell this sort of more 20th century retelling of Shakespeare. Anyway, one of his best friends from the Book of Mormon, which was another musical that he was in, the West End show. The two of them were both in this rock and roll show, and Mark was from Stoke. And it was really interesting for Felix. So Felix, growing up in Chichester, he was performing on the stage at Chichester Festival Theatre, which is this huge theatre with 1,200 seats, the big thrust stage, big concrete modernist building, when he was 14, and had and that, so if because they've got a really good youth theatre, and that felt very normal to him. Whereas for Mark, who must have been, I don't know, 28, 30 years old, I don't think he'd ever performed in his hometown before. So it was a completely different experience and a different. So I think he felt that he had come back a different person to Stoke, because he'd gone away and he'd trained and he'd worked in London and he'd gone on tour and so on. Then suddenly there he was, a new. Whereas for Felix, there was this in his hometown, there was this great continuity of experience. It's like what we were talking about before, Kaz, isn't it? We were talking about how circumstances prepare you for different experiences, and then you respond to them, you take advantage of them, and so on. And all of us, well, we will respond differently to similar things, don't we?
We do, and I was like seeing how people respond to their hometowns. I don't really have a hometown.
Now, why is that?
Because my parents left where I was born when I was 6 months old, and we've never really been back.
Right.
So I have a birth certificate with a cool name on it, and then a bit of a bag of like other places. Yeah.
That's interesting.
But it's quite nice to hear other people's stories. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
I love like that kind of thing about. I think it's one of the other things that draws you to like any kind of fiction and things.
Yes. Yeah, the same empathy that you bring to reading fictional characters on the page, you can bring to real people as well, can't you?
Yes.
I had the experience. Joe Dickinson, who's a brilliant publisher at Hodder, who's in charge of the division of the company that's publishing my cozy crime novels. She wanted to brief the cover designer for Murder at Bitling Fair, which is a fair of woodland crafts, carving spoons and making spindles and chairs and so on. And I said, well, I could send you the prologue, or that you can give to the designer, because that's very pictorial, and that prologue is really strongly shaped by some of my own experience. So one of the reasons I always wear headphones to do these things is because my mum is not far away, because she's 93 years old, and if she has an emergency of any kind, I can hear her, but you can't hear her through my microphone, so that's a good thing. Now, when I was 5 years old, we lived in this really horrible house. She was a single parent with 3 children, and the house was tied to the only job she could find, which was as a nursery school teacher in this tiny village in southeast Hampshire called Southwick, where every single property in the village was owned by one woman. Every door and every window was badly painted in the same sickly green. She controlled the rents, she controlled people's comings and goings. She would leave people critical notes if she didn't like the way they were behaving, or if they hadn't mown their lawn, and all of that sort of thing. And it was a horrible rundown house with only one tap in the whole building, a cold tap over the kitchen sink, and it only had hot water if we lit a fire, and a toilet down the garden and all of that. Anyway, so that was my experience, sort of 64, 5, 6, 7, that sort of time. But it struck me that a village like that, a tied village, where one minor aristocrat has such huge power over so many lives, that would generate resentment and upset and trouble for everybody in the village, even beyond how much they might hate her. It would go beyond that because when people are forced into close proximity and their circumstances are difficult, it's very easy for people to turn on one another. So that life experience of my origins, very much sort of transmuted into fiction, is the world of Murder at Bitling Fair.
Ah, interesting. I thought it was interesting we were saying it's sort of woodland crafts and things as well, because you said Murder at Bitling Fair, and I presumed a fair like a fairground.
Yeah, I might do one of those, a fair with a fairground. I'll come to that in just a second. The reason the woodland fair that I really like that is because of all the weapons. Don't you think?
No, yeah,
Chisels and saws and
it's a cool idea. No, I like it. It's probably better than a fairground, but it's just because
but
you said it.
the fairground one is also really good. I'll tell you why. Because in Chichester on the 20th of October every year, there's a fair in a car park on the north edge of the town. And it's quite a big car park. So it's a big fair that comes. It's called Sloe Fair, SLOE. And it came from, years and years ago when it was the time when sloes were harvested for the making of gin, which is something that many people want to celebrate. And it just so happened that that fair coincides with my wife's birthday. And so when she was little, her parents inevitably told her that the fair was coming because it was her birthday. I quite like the idea of an innocent little girl in the midst of a cozy crime mystery who thinks that the fair that comes to town on this one day each year comes for her. And then there's quite a drama behind it potentially, because if ever the fair does not turn up for the 20th of October in Northgate Car Park in Chichester, the covenant will be broken and they will no longer have the right to come ever again.
Ooh,
So that's the good dramatic pressure, isn't it?
yeah, it's a very good dramatic pressure. Sam's at Donna's currently drinking gin, apparently.
Well, that makes it all worthwhile. Good.
Yeah, I'm down with that, Donna. It's interesting how it's made though as well. Sam wants to know if there's any books you think all writers studying their craft should read.
That they should read.
Hmm.
Well, I mean, because I'm very old, I've read a lot of books, and it's hard to say which ones have been most formative. But I do know that this is something that Kate sees a lot with the Women's Prize for Fiction. So the Women's Prize was set up nearly 30 years ago now, and it celebrates novels written in English from anywhere in the world by women. And it's £30,000 prize, and it's made a massive difference to lots of careers. And I tell you what, there's a thing that comes up a lot, which is writers saying, I used to think that I ought to write books like the authors who I admired, and I didn't become a successful writer until I discovered the books that I ought to write in my own voice, until I stopped reaching for another voice. And I think that's really common. So that's on the question of voice. I actually know I know a publisher who met a woman who was subsequently a very successful writer of women's fiction, lots and lots of novels, all really, really successful. But the script that the publisher had received, she didn't think was. She thought there were lots of good things about it, but she wasn't sort of convinced by it, carried away by it. And when the woman came in, was invited in, and she said this to this woman author, whose name I can't tell you. The publisher said, but why didn't you write this book like you talk? I mean, it's a good book, but I don't think I can publish it. But if you wrote it like you talk, I could publish that. And the author went away and she did exactly that. She stopped trying to be somebody else and she just wrote in her own voice. And it was the same story, the same characters, the same circumstances, but it was more authentically hers. So I'd say there's that. Then the second thing is all stories go set up, development, crescendo, climax. That's just the shape of a story, of a play, of a film, of a novel. All the chapters of a novel, they've got a similar shape. They go set up, development, crescendo, new question. You know, the thing that makes you turn the page at the end of every chapter. So that's another thing that I'd say, that you need to have that sense of like natural narrative shape in the back of your mind when you sit down to write. Not worry about narrative shape when you sit down to write, but have already absorbed that and like incorporated it into how you think. So those are the two things. But I think also it is really valuable to read lots of puzzle whodunits, because the best writers of puzzle whodunits, they are really gifted for narrative structure, aren't they? So even if you're going to write a romance fiction or an erotic story or an adventure story, the structure of those puzzle whodunits is going to stand you in good stead.
That's a really interesting thing to say, because as crime as a genre, much like romance and things like that, doesn't always get sort of the recognition it deserves. I don't know. I'm not so sure how to word that, if you know what I mean.
I agree with you that it
People
doesn't
kind of
get
dismiss it as a genre, like genre fiction, rather than being important. And then for you,
I went to an event once. Do you know James Runcie, who wrote Grantchester, or is still writing Grantchester novels? He's a lovely guy. He did this event where he showed paragraphs of different books and said to the audience, "Is this Booker or crime?" Just the first paragraphs. Is this, a Booker shortlisted novel, or is this a crime novel? And the audience couldn't tell them apart. They couldn't say, "Oh yeah, that's the crime novel. Yeah, oh yeah, that's the great literature novel." They simply couldn't do it. They were split. And different people were plumping for different ones, and different people in the audience liked one more than the other. And it wasn't to do with whether they loved crime or loved literary novels or so on. And there are books written by Ian Rankin, for example, just to take one example, about really serious issues like, I don't know, sex trafficking, for example. And in and that issue is addressed in one of the Rebus novels as well as it ever has been in any other book that I've read. With empathy, understanding, drama, excitement, all the things that you want. Just one other thing, my agent Luigi Bonomi used to be at Mills and Boon as a publisher, and I think he retains. I don't know what that company is like these days. I think it might be a bit more structured, a bit more like closely guarded formula in what the different Mills and Boon lists release. But I know that he's a big fan of those very well structured romance novels.
Malcolm has asked you, Malcolm Hollingdrake, one of our authors, has said, "What's the best opening sentence to a crime novel you've read?"
Best opening sentence to
That's
a
a really
crime
good
novel.
question.
Yeah, it is. So it's not a crime novel, but it is, I think, one of the greatest novels ever written. I think it's quite a funny story to this, or an odd story. Um, after I'd done my degree, I did a degree in drama and English at Goldsmiths College, University of London, and after that I was working in Fringe Theatre in London, and not really able to earn a living. And so, in order to supplement my finances, I modeled naked for sculptors at Camberwell School of Arts and Crafts. Whilst doing that, because that's quite boring, right? You just stood there. I got, I made a little stand to hold a book so that I could read whilst I was standing there being, bored out of my mind, but naked. And I read a book in English translation, and it just so happened that the translator was an American English translator, but I still thought this was an amazing book. Then, years later, when I was living in Paris, I bought the same book in French, and I read it again, and I thought, this is twice the book. And I looked to see who translated it, and it was a husband and wife team, or a wife and husband team, one of them Spanish and one of them French. And it was just so much more of a book. And that day, I vowed that I would learn Spanish, or I would improve my Spanish so that I could read that same book in Spanish, which a few years later I did. So that book is 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And it is, it's like a saga. It's the story of this bunch of essentially working class Colombian people who go and found a village in the jungle and they turn it into a city. And it's a saga because it lasts for 100 years of this extraordinary family's life. And the first sentence I'll have to paraphrase because I've not got it in front of me, but it goes something like this. Many years later, facing the firing squad, Colonel Aureliano Buendia remembered the day his father took him to see ice.
Yeah. It's one of the best opening sentences in literature, to be honest, isn't it?
Oh, good. I'm so pleased. Yeah, I'm so pleased you think so. I think it's a magnificent opening sentence. And then when you read on and you understand that they're in this village in the jungle, Aureliano is just this little boy at this point, and his dad is this mad inventor, and he only gets to see ice because the gypsies periodically come rattling through the town, bringing them stuff to sell, pots and pans and so on. And on this occasion, they brought with them ice.
Yeah.
And where would that ice have come from? Well, it would have come from a ship that went to much further south in Latin America and collected ice, freshwater ice, and then put it in the hold of the ship and brought it back, and and so on and so on. That whole anyway. Yeah, great question. That's not a crime novel, but that's the one I'd like to tell you.
Yeah, good choice. And your reads of the year, we've got 5 minutes left. So your reads of the year so far, as I show you my pile of books.
Yeah, there's always obviously Kate Mosse, and incredibly, because she works so hard, there's 2 books from her this year. So there is the 3rd volume of the Joubert family chronicles, The Ghost Ship, which she's done this incredible thing with, that she's made this amazing standalone novel of women who go to sea as pirates in order to find freedom and autonomy and self-determination. And The Ghost Ship is genuinely this extraordinary standalone adventure novel. But if you've read The Burning Chambers and The City of Tears before it, it's the 3rd book in the series. So that's incredible. Almost even more than The Ghost Ship, another extraordinary achievement. She wrote a book called Warrior Queens and Quiet Revolutionaries, which has this brilliant subtitle, How Women Also Made the World. And interestingly, in Spanish, the titles are the other way around. It's called How Women Also Made the World, and the subtitle is Warrior Queens and Quiet Revolutionaries. Anyway, because that book was so well received, she was invited to create a one-woman show, which she toured for like 35 dates in spring this year, going from town to town. If it's Thursday, it's Bradford. If it's Friday, it's Manchester, and so on. This incredible 2-act, one-woman theatrical performance. So that's non-fiction. So fiction, The Ghost Ship, non-fiction. The next one is also connected to Kate because it's the winner of the Women's Prize for Fiction last June, which was by Barbara Kingsolver, and it's called Demon Copperhead. And Demon Copperhead is inspired by David Copperfield, the Dickens novel, but it's set where Barbara Kingsolver lives in the Appalachian Mountains in the midst of the 21st century opioid crisis, in which poor people were flogged addictive drugs on purpose to create dependence and to create a flow of money from the most disadvantaged in society into the coffers of big pharmaceuticals industry. And it's an incredible book. Barbara Kingsolver, Demon Copperhead.
And quite often, in the case of the opioid crisis, into the pockets of one family in America.
Yes, that's right. I was talking to Donna about this the other day because Kate and I were just on the Queen Mary 2, the cruise. When we're not sure that we like cruises, but it was an amazing experience. Do you know what I mean? So it was the Times and Sunday Times Cheltenham Festival at Sea. So we were invited to do it, which is just brilliant and very generous of them. When we got to New York, we did something that we love to do, which was go to some galleries, and of course that thing about the Sacker family sponsorship of the arts in America is such a live issue, and it's going to remain so, isn't it?
It is indeed. Empire of Pain, the book about that family, was like one of my top reads of last year.
Is that right?
Hmm.
It's a grueling story as well, though, isn't it?
It really is, but really interesting.
Kate and I, one of our favorite TV shows is Grey's Anatomy. And a couple of seasons ago, when, like, almost before it was a big thing in the press, there were a couple of storylines about middle class addiction and use of opioid drugs. And then, do you remember it was also a big thing in House, that Hugh Laurie show, also set in America? The doctor, suffered from used a walking stick, suffered from pain, and I think the drug he was abusing was Vicodin. And so there he was, an effective, important doctor, making positive difference to many people's lives, but also dependent on this illegal.
Yeah.
Great ethical conundrum.
And then before you disappear, or before we finish our stream, because you've got a minute left, to give people a crash reminder of what they're going to go away and buy.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah. Okay. So, if you've not read The Coming Darkness, currently out in paperback, and it's in one of the supermarkets, I can't remember which just at this point. Murder at Church Lodge, if you're a completist sort of person, needs to start at the beginning, which came out last July. Murder at Bunting Manor, which came out also in November and is the second in the series. Looking forward to Murder at the Theatre in March next year, and Murder at Bitling Fair in July next year.
You're a very busy man.
Oh, Jesus, I forgot one. And The Coming Storm in April next year. The sequel to The Coming Darkness. Oh, my God.
Wow.
Yes, madness. What was I thinking?
That's what I mean. You're a very busy man. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Cass.